Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me on this quick whistle-stop tour of the English language paper 2 question 5. Now paper 2 question 5 is the big one for the paper, and what I mean by that is one question with so much weighting. At having 40 marks, it's 50% of the overall paper, and it's about 45 minutes worth of the exam in order to respond to this question. So what I want to do is I really want to unpick how to understand the question and what the question's all about, how to prepare your response, and even bordering on how to support you with structuring your answer and planning for those responses. Now, once again, I do stress it is the big one, so we need to make sure that we're doing this question properly and that we're exhibiting the best parts of ourselves as well. The question itself is assessed on two separate AOs. Those two AOs are AO5 and AO6. Now, what that means is that basically the examiners need to see that you can communicate clearly, that you are talking or you are writing in a sophisticated tone, and that you're organizing your ideas. So it doesn't just look like everything's thrown on the paper. It looks like actually you're clear in what you want to say, and you're making sure that you're including the points to get there. Now, the AO6 part of it is all about this understanding of the vocabulary choices that you use and whether you construct your sentences and include that punctuation for effect. Now, what we've got to do from the start is the most obvious places that we're going to be looking at is for AO5, we need to look at our planning. And for AO6, we need to look at our reading through and our editing. So how can we automatically make a quick difference with this question? Well, the first thing that we'd do is we'd obviously plan the response. Once we've written the response, we'd then check through it. And when we're checking through it, we're checking for our capital letters, full stops, our apostrophes, but also we're really honing in on how could we make this piece even better. A piece of writing doesn't need to look pristine. It doesn't need to look perfection. It needs to have scribbles, crosses out. It needs to have going, okay, maybe this word could be better than this word, or maybe I need to get that into that way. And it's about really honing in on how to make your response as best as it possibly can be. Now, in order to do that, you will be asked whether or what kind of form that you're expected to write in. Generally, there are 4 forms that are identified by the AQA. Those are the letters and the articles, the speeches and the leaflets. Now, I'm just going to do a quick understanding of this, because what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to overcomplicate it. My biggest advice that I would give to anyone is actually there are only certain parts that the form should affect. And those are primarily what we call the aesthetics, the what it looks like. In most circumstances, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to alter or sacrifice any of that sophisticated vocabulary, any of that amazing content, because of this misconceived idea as to what a newspaper article should look like or what a letter should look like. Actually, your content could remain fairly similar throughout all of them. It is just the aesthetics that change. So, for example, with a letter, and as you can see taken from the AQA, it's more the fact that you have to have a clear identification of the use of address, the to whom it may concern, and then you'd start writing it normally. Okay, and then you'd have your sign off at the end, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, many thanks, anything like that. So your letter would appear something like this. With a newspaper article, you've got the same content, but the big difference being is the fact that actually with a newspaper article, you've got your headline, you've got your subheading or your strapline, you've got included throughout, you could have a range of subheadings, okay, to clearly identify that point. We see that with quite a lot of circumstances. I absolutely love a subheading, but the reason that I love a subheading is because it allows me to control my thoughts. It allows me to formulate those ideas. So in whichever circumstance, a subheading could be used effectively. If you've got a speech, turn that subheading into a rhetorical question, because actually then it's still honing in and it's still directly addressing the audience. If you, for example, got a leaflet, my biggest advice would be treat it in the same way that you've treated an article. What we don't want is people panicking over, looking at it and going, oh my gosh, I've got a leaflet, or heaven forbid, trying to fold the paper over to create a leaflet. Instead, treat it in the exact same way aesthetically, so how it looks like, as an article. And a text of speech. Now, obviously, we're not going to have any headlines on there, but what we can have that content, but really brought to life through the direct address, really brought to life by the rhetoric, by the understanding of that logos and ethos and pathos, and how it all creates this piece that is directly towards an audience. But in none of these forms should we hear, or should we see that starting line of, I am writing this speech too, I am writing this letter too, I am writing this article too. You know, those are the two biggest faux pas, aren't they? One, acknowledging what form it is, other than aesthetically, and two, repeating the statement. We do not want a repetition of whatever statement is in front of us. So those are just two big points to start off with. Now, whenever we're looking at any question, the first thing that you need to ask yourself is, what are your big ideas? So what are your standpoints? And you may have some straight away. You may have some big ideas straight away. You know, I'm going to talk about this, this, this. I always say, try and bullet point your big ideas down, you know, get them there. Imagine it was a list 4 things, list 4 things that you want to say that you could talk about with this. Can you? Good. They're your big ideas that you can really explode and go to town with. Now, in some circumstances, you might go, well, I don't have any big ideas in this scenario. And actually, what I'd suggest doing then is going to the vocabulary stage. Now, we know that when you look at paper 2, question 5, one of the 2 places where it could be easily improved is the vocabulary choices that are used by people. We want to stay away from the beige and the unclear, but also the length. Okay, we want a solid piece that shows and exhibits 40 marks worth of greatness from it. We don't want a piece that's half a page or a page long, because actually that's what you feel like a letter is. Imagine your paper 1, question 5. If you wrote 3-4 pages for that, what's the difference? It's about the planning. The planning's going to get there. So a big step with the planning is recording some key vocabulary that you could use. Now, yes, you might include that sophisticated vocabulary, but it might be starting off quite small. You know, it might include words like appalling. Take, for example, let's have a look at, we've got this one in here. The rise of knife crime amongst young people, closely connected to the popularity of drill music and violent video games. In this circumstance, you're being asked to write an article for your school magazine or website in which you argue for or against the statement. And what you'll see is the first thing that we do is go, okay, what language can we use, right? Senseless violence, imitation, glamorization of crime, free will, injustice, stereotyping, prejudice, getting all of those words down. So you're actually enhancing that sophisticated vocabulary as well. And then your big ideas might be linked, well, will be linked to that vocabulary. You'll be able to pick it all up in there. Okay, and you'll be able to develop them further. So let's take, for example, this one. Homework has no value. I think we've all seen this one before. Write the article for the broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your point of view. And I'm highlighting and I'm bugging this and I'm boxing off the article, because then in my head I know that whatever I write content-wise, I need to make sure that I've got that headline there. Okay, just the little things that make a big difference to the overall piece. I need it to have a headline in this circumstance. Just off the back of that, before I forget, if you are asked to write a newspaper article and you can't come up with a headline straight away, do not panic. Leave the space for your headline and come back to that later. What you don't want to do is waste 5 or 10 minutes thinking about this amazing headline when actually you should have been spending that time on your content. But in this circumstance, we start thinking about vocabulary words, and we might go with things like freedom and free will, stress, anxiety, barbaric regime. Or alternatively, the other hand is you might talk about how there's a prevention of an apathetic attitude, okay, or promoting independence or collaboration. Do you know what I mean? So you start thinking about it from all points. Now, when you do that, you can then start to formulate, well, what are my big ideas? Homework prevents an apathetic attitude. It builds independence and reflection, and it ensures a comprehension of the curriculum. You're developing this clear argument and structure, not necessarily always based on your viewpoints, but based on what's going to promote the best response, those big ideas. Now, if we look at this one, so we've got a write article again. Snow seems like picturesque. We remember this one well. This was last year's. And this one, twofold. One of the things that I would say about this one is don't be hindered, don't be held back by creating this distinction between paper 1 and paper 2. Okay, actually, you could still include a lot of that descriptive language, a lot of that sophisticated vocabulary in there. We'd want to see all of that coming through. Just because it's asking for a newspaper article does not mean that it needs to be beige. Make it that rainbow of ideas. So in this one, we've got like the exquisite portrayal of winter, and you can see an entire paragraph talking about the frivolity of it and playing in the snow, fun and laughter, and revisiting childhood. But then on the flip of that, you could talk about the chaos. You could talk about the fact that it's everything at a standstill, or this impenetrable blockade that it creates. Once you've got those ideas, you start thinking, right, well, where am I coming from with it? And we talk about snow embracing those unique qualities, the idea of don't panic, prepare, and the positive descriptions. Now, even as you're writing those, you're going, well, actually, that don't panic, prepare, that makes an excellent subheading. So we're already being able to formulate those responses. Now, more often than not, once you've got your big ideas, you are ready to write and you're ready to complete the response. But sometimes people just need a little bit of a help. Now, when I say a structure, what I don't mean is you've got to do this, then this, then this, then this. But actually, if this is a bit of a checklist, if you are struggling for what to write next, it just gives you some indications as to which avenues that you can go down. So, for example, really engaging that starting point, not with I am writing this speech today to tell you that, but instead really incorporating the audience in that opening. Imagine if, imagine if you were playing all that, what you can bring to the table with your imagination, using those rhetorical questions, talking about your big ideas. If you've just come up with 3 big ideas, really honing in on those. Giving an anecdote, which is that short story in connection with it. So what you've got there and what you should have there is a lot more of the emotive language being able to shine through, a lot more of that pathos being brought to the table. The key data you want to be really incorporating that logos and that ethos. And if you remember with the Aristotelian triad, what I mean by that is give me those facts and statistics. 84% of the people, of the people asked hate Marmite. But then give me that source from it. According to a recent study by the University of Manchester, 84% of people. It really adds to that understanding of it, that professional attitude to it. Giving different perspectives is really good to incorporate that hyperbolic language, because you could always have someone that goes very much one way and someone that goes very much the other way. So you can really incorporate that love-hate language that you've been building up over time, that sophisticated vocabulary. I like this idea of, with anything in life, when you're writing, is being able to summarize. So actually being able to summarize at the end, actually, what actions need to be taken from this? We've said this, and instead of us just being a complaining front, actually we need to be an action front. So what do we need to do about it? And that could come very much in bullet point form. Okay, using and incorporating those bullet points. So what next? We need to do this, this, and this, or this needs to happen, then this needs to happen, and then this needs to happen. And it really supports this idea of the argument and the creation and of forming an argument together. And then finally, that conclusion, what are you trying to say? What has been the purpose of it? When we look at something, this is just a starting point that we've got off, but talking about that imagine statement at the start. Imagine if we lived in a world where our children were constantly exposed to violence and aggression, where their childhood, and don't forget, even as I'm checking through this, I'm going, let's get rid of that, where their childhood is ripped away and replaced with shocking scenes that we would dare to refer to as games or music. When do we say that enough is enough? Really embedding that rhetorical question in there. When do we stop being ignorant? So really incorporating that repetition of it. But what I'm not doing is I'm not staying in a safe box, so to speak. I'm not staying in this box of this is what an article should look like. I'm going to talk about this fact here. I'm going to do that. No, really, really incorporating a personality into it. You want to put a personality into this question response. Finally, thank you for sticking with me for so long. But my top tips for this question would be that you must read through your response and edit. Spend the 45 minutes on it, because it is worth it. Plan ahead and come up with your clear big ideas. Get your keywords wrote down first. come up with those big ideas from your keywords and think about how you're going to formulate it. And then finally, don't be put off by the form, okay? Do not let the form dictate your content. Your content should always remain high level, and that's what you need to be thinking of all the way through. Thank you so much for joining me on this, and good luck with your exams.